Hello, beautiful friends. This is Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast to help you relax, rest, and hopefully fall asleep. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I am here to help you connect more deeply with your divine guidance, your divine team, and the magic in your soul. This podcast is designed to keep you company, to be a soft and soothing voice that you can listen to as you let go of the day and slip into a beautiful, restful sleep. The format of the podcast is that I am going to be bringing forward some beautiful love from the angels, and then I'm going to read to you a bedtime story. The episode will be about an hour in length, so that you'll have plenty of time to relax and go deep. And if for some reason the angels aren't your thing, that's okay. I'll have a timestamp in the show notes that tells you when the story begins. So, dear ones, I invite you to take a deep breath in and out as we gently call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And beautiful angels of light, we ask that you join us here. And we ask that you infuse this broadcast with divine love and light and healing, so that everyone who hears this message will receive the blessing of your love. And take another deep, beautiful breath in and allow your body to begin relaxing. Whether you're snuggled up under your favorite comforter, or maybe you're preparing for a nice nap in your favorite chair, the angels will join you wherever you are. And with your permission, they will bring their energy closer to you. So just breathe and receive the love. You know, the concept of divine love can sometimes be a bit challenging to understand through our human experiences. I think we like to imagine that we know what it is to love unconditionally. But the truth is, that's not always an easy concept to appreciate. So I thought I would share with you something the angels once shared with me. They said, can you imagine that the divine love, that God's love, and that the love of the angels is greater than the sun? And I said, yes. And they said, well, can you ever imagine the sun determining that anyone was unworthy of its light? Or could you imagine ever feeling like you were using up too much sun because the sun was needed elsewhere? And they said, if this simple concept can be understood about the sun, why would divine love be any less generous and available and sustainable than the sun? So this is your invitation to breathe and receive the waves of divine love from your angels who have loved you since before you were born. They have loved you through every moment of your life, every breath you have been loved. And your angels are aware of all that is transpiring in your life right now. They are here to help clear your worries. They're here to help carry any burdens. And they are here to help you connect more deeply with inspiration and love, because you are a beautiful, bright being. You have magic and love stored within you that makes this world a better place. And there are miracles on their way to you now. There are new waves of inspiration being seeded in your name. The angels are helping whisper you into a brighter experience of your true, authentic beauty and light. And you are precious in all this world. And so just allow yourself to relax and receive the blessings from the angels who love you so. They will help lift and clear from you anything that does not belong to you, so that you can get a beautiful, restful night's sleep. And now let's start with tonight's bedtime story, where I'm going to read to you part 2 of Edith Nesbitt's book, The Enchanted Castle. We read the first part in the last episode, and I'll bring you up to speed. So, a group of siblings, children, Gerald, Jimmy, and Kathleen, had gone on an adventure. And they went through their town, into the forest, and they found their way through a cave that exited into the grounds of a castle. And as they went through the garden, they came upon what appeared to be a sleeping princess, a little girl in a golden pink dress. Following all sorts of practical understanding of how fairy tale magic works, they elected Jimmy as the one to kiss the princess awake. He did, and it worked. And now the children are all about to go with her to her castle for some food. When Jimmy had awakened the sleeping princess and she had invited the 3 children to go with her to her palace and get something to eat, they all knew quite surely that they had come into a place of magic happenings. And they walked in a slow procession along the grass towards the castle. The princess went first, and Kathleen carried her shining train. Then came Jimmy, and Gerald came last. They were all quite sure they had walked right into the middle of a fairy tale, and they were the more ready to believe it because they were so tired and hungry. They were, in fact, so hungry and tired that they hardly noticed where they were going or observed the beauties of the formal gardens through which the pink silk princess was leading them. They were in a sort of dream from which they could only partially awaken to find themselves in a big hall with suits of armor and old flags round the walls and heavy oak tables and benches ranged along it. The princess entered slowly and stately, but once inside she twitched her sheeny train out of Jimmy's hand and turned to the 3. "You just wait here a minute," she said, "and mind you, don't talk while I'm away. This castle is crammed with magic, and I don't know what will happen if you talk." And with that, picking up the thick, goldy pink folds under her arms, she ran out, as Jimmy said afterwards, most unprincess-like, showing as she ran black stockings and black strapped shoes. Jimmy wanted very much to say that he didn't believe anything would happen, only he was afraid something would happen if he did. So he merely made a face and put out his tongue. The others pretended not to see this, which was much more crushing than anything they could have said. So they sat in silence, and Gerald ground the heel of his boot upon the marble floor. Then the princess came back, very slowly, and kicking her long skirts in front of her at every step. She could not hold them up now because of the tray she carried. It was not a silver tray as you might have expected, but an oblong tin one. She set it down noisily on the end of the long table and breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh, it was heavy," she said. "I don't know what fairy feast the children's fancy had been busy with, Anyhow, this was nothing like it. The heavy tray held a loaf of bread, a lump of cheese, and a brown jug of water. The rest of its heaviness was just plates and mugs and knives. "Come along," the princess said hospitably. "I couldn't find anything but bread and cheese, but it doesn't matter because everything's magic here. And unless you have some dreadful secret fault, the bread and cheese will turn into anything you like." "What would you like?" she asked Kathleen. "Roast chicken," said Kathleen without hesitation. The Pinky Princess cut a slice of bread and laid it on a dish. "There you are," she said. "Roast chicken. Shall I carve it, or will you?" "You, please," said Kathleen, and received a piece of dry bread on a plate. "Green peas?" asked the princess, cut a piece of cheese and laid it beside the bread. Kathleen began to eat the bread, cutting it up with knife and fork as you would eat chicken. It was no use owning that she didn't see any chicken and peas, or anything but cheese and dry bread, because that would be owning that she had some dreadful secret fault. "If I have, it is a secret even from me," she told herself. The others asked for roast beef and cabbage and got it, she supposed, though to her it only looked like dry bread and Dutch cheese. "I do wonder what my dreadful secret fault is," she thought, as the princess remarked that as for her, she could fancy a slice of roast peacock. "The one," she added, lifting a second mouthful of dry bread onto her fork, "is quite delicious." "It's a game, isn't it?" asked Jimmy suddenly. "What's a game?" asked the princess, frowning. "Pretending it's beef, the bread and cheese, I mean." "A game? But it is beef. Look at it," said the princess, opening her eyes very wide. "Yes, of course," said Jimmy feebly. "I was only joking." Bread and cheese is not perhaps so good as roast beef or chicken or peacock. Well, I'm not sure about the peacock. I never tasted it. Did you? But bread and cheese is, at any rate, very much better than nothing when you have gone on having nothing since breakfast. Gooseberries and ginger beer hardly count. And it is long past your proper dinner time. Everyone ate and drank and felt much better. "Now," said the princess, brushing the breadcrumbs off of her silk green lap, "if you're sure you won't have any more meat, you can come and see my treasures. Sure you won't take the last bit more chicken? No? Well, then follow me." She got up and they followed her down the long hall to the end, where the great stone stairs ran up at each side and joined in a broad flight leading to the gallery above. Under the stairs was a hanging of tapestry. "Beneath this," said the princess, "is the door leading to my private apartments." She held the tapestry up with both hands, for it was heavy, and showed a little door that had been hidden by it. "The key," she said, "hangs above." And so it did, on a large rusty nail. "Put it in," said the princess, "and turn it." Gerald did so, and the great key creaked and grated in the lock. "Now push," she said. "Push hard, all of you." And they pushed hard, all of them. The door gave way and they fell over each other into the dark space beyond. The princess dropped the curtain and came after them, closing the door behind her. "Look out," she said, "look out, there are 2 steps down." "Thank you," said Gerald, rubbing his knee at the bottom of the step. "We found that out for ourselves." "I'm sorry," said the princess, "but you can't have hurt yourselves much. Go straight on, there aren't any more steps." They went straight on in the dark. "When you come to the door, just turn the handle and go in. Then stand still till I find the matches. I know where they are." "Did they have matches 100 years ago?" asked Jimmy. "I meant the tinder box," said the princess quickly. "We always called it the matches, don't you? Here, let me go first." She did, and when they had reached the door, she was waiting for them with a candle in her hand. She thrust it on Gerald. "Hold it steady," she said, and undid the shutters of a long window so that first a yellow streak and then a blazing great oblong of light flashed at them, and then the room was full of sunshine. "It makes the candle look quite silly," said Jimmy. "So it does," said the princess and blew out the candle. Then she took the key from the outside of the door, put it in the inside keyhole, and turned it. The room they were in was small and high. Its domed ceiling was of deep blue with gold stars painted on it. The walls were of wood paneled and carved, and there was no furniture in it whatsoever. "This," said the princess, "is my treasure chamber." "But where," asked Kathleen politely, "are the treasures?" "Don't you see them?" asked the princess. "No, we don't," said Jimmy bluntly. "You don't come that bread and cheese game with me, not twice over. You don't." "If you really don't see them," said the princess, "I suppose I shall have to say the charm. Shut your eyes, please, and give me your word of honor that you won't look until I tell you, and that you'll never tell anyone what you've seen." Their words of honor were something that the children would rather not have given just then, but they gave them all the same and shut their eyes. "Yugadoo, begadee, ligadeeve, nowgadow," said the princess rapidly, and they heard the swish of her silk train moving across the room. Then there was a creaking, rustling noise. "She's locking us in," said Jimmy. "Your word of honor," gasped Gerald. "Oh, do be quick," moaned Kathleen. "You may look," said the voice of the princess. And they looked. The room was not the same, yet yes, the starry, vaulted blue ceiling was there, and below it 6 feet of the dark paneling. But below that the walls of the room blazed and sparkled with white and blue and red and green and gold and silver. Shelves ran around the room, and on them were gold cups and silver dishes, and platters and goblets set with gems, ornaments of gold and silver, tiaras of diamonds, necklaces of rubies, strings of emeralds and pearls, all set out in an unimaginable splendor against a background of faded blue velvet. It was like the crown jewels that you see when your kind uncle takes you to the tower, only there seem to be far more jewels than you or anyone else has ever seen together at the tower or anywhere else. The three children remained breathless, open-mouthed, staring at the sparkling splendors all about them, while the princess stood, her arms stretched out in a gesture of command and a proud smile on her lips. "My word," said Gerald in a low whisper, but no one spoke out loud. They waited as if spellbound for the princess to speak. She spoke. "What price bread and cheese games now?" she asked triumphantly. "Can I do magic or can't I?" "You can, oh you can," said Kathleen. May we touch?" asked Gerald. "All that is mine is yours," said the princess with a generous wave of her brown hand, and added quickly, "Only of course you mustn't take anything away with you." "We're not thieves," said Jimmy. The others were already turning over the wonderful things on the blue velvet shelves. "Perhaps not," said the princess, "but you're a very unbelieving little boy. You think I can't see inside you, but I can. I know what you've been thinking." "What?" asked Jimmy. "Oh, you know well enough," said the princess. "You're thinking about the bread and cheese that I changed into beef and about your secret fault. I say let's all dress up and you be the prince and princess too." "To crown our hero," said Gerald, lifting a gold crown with a cross on the top, "was the work of a moment." He put the crown on his head and added a collar and a zone of sparkling emeralds, which would not quite meet around his middle. He turned from fixing it by an ingenious adaptation of his belt to find the others already decked with diadems, necklaces, and rings. "How splendid you look," said the princess, "and how I wish your clothes were prettier. What ugly clothes people wear nowadays 100 years ago." Kathleen stood quite still with a diamond bracelet raised in her hand. "I say," she said, "the king and queen." "What king and queen?" said the princess. "Your father and mother, your sorrowing parents," said Kathleen. "They'll have waked up by now. Won't they be wanting to see you after 100 years, you know?" "Oh, yes," said the princess slowly. "I embraced my rejoicing parents when I got the bread and cheese. They're having their dinner and won't expect me yet. Here," she added, hastily putting a ruby bracelet on Kathleen's arm. "See how splendid that is?" Kathleen would have been quite content to go on all day trying on different jewels and looking at herself in the little silver-framed mirror that the princess took from one of the shelves. But the boys were soon weary of this amusement. "Look here," said Gerald. "If you're sure your father and mother won't want you, let's go out and have a jolly good game of something. You could play besieged castles awfully well in that maze unless you can't do any more magic tricks." "You forget," said the princess. "I'm grown up. I don't play games. And I don't like to do too much magic at a time. It's so tiring. Besides, it'll take us ever so long to put all these things back in their proper places." It did. The children would have laid the jewels just anywhere, but the princess showed them that every necklace or ring or bracelet had its own home on the velvet, a slight hollowing in the shelf beneath, so that each stone fitted into its own little nest. As Kathleen was fitting the last shining ornament into its proper place, She saw that part of the shelf near it held not bright jewels, but rings and brooches and chains, as well as queer things that she did not know the names of, and all were of dull metals and odd shapes. "What's all of this rubbish?" she asked. "Rubbish indeed," said the princess. "Why, those are all magic things. This bracelet, anyone who wears it has got to speak the truth. This chain makes you as strong as 10 men. If you wear this spur, your horse will go a mile a minute. Or if you're walking, it's the same as 7-league boots." "What does this brooch do?" asked Kathleen, reaching out her hand. The princess caught her by the wrist. "You mustn't touch," she said. "If anyone but me touches them, all the magic goes out at once and never comes back. The brooch will give you any wish you like." "And this ring," Jimmy pointed. "Oh, that makes you invisible." "What's this?" asked Gerald, showing a curious buckle. "Oh, that undoes the effect of all the other charms." "Do you mean really?" Jimmy asked. "You're not just kidding?" "Kidding indeed," repeated the princess scornfully. "I should have thought I'd shown you enough magic to prevent you speaking to a princess like that." "I say," said Gerald, visibly excited, "you might show us how some of the things act. Couldn't you give us each a wish?" The princess did not at once answer, and the minds of the 3 played with granted wishes, brilliant, yet thoroughly reasonable, the kind of wish that never seems to occur to people in fairy tales when they suddenly get a chance to have their 3 wishes granted. "No," said the princess suddenly. "No, I can't give wishes to you. It only gives me wishes. But I'll let you see the ring make me invisible. Only you must shut your eyes while I do it." They shut them. "Count 50, said the princess, "and then you may look. And then you must shut them again and count 50, and I'll reappear." Gerald counted aloud. Through the counting, one could hear a creaking, rustling sound. 47, 48, 49, 50, said Gerald, and they opened their eyes. They were alone in the room. The jewels had vanished, and so had the princess. "She's gone out by the door, of course," said Jimmy, but the door was locked. "That is magic," said Kathleen breathlessly. And Jimmy said, "I want my tea." "Your tea?" Gerald's tone was full of contempt. "The lovely princess," he went on, "reappeared as soon as our hero had finished counting to 50. 1, 2, 3, 4. Gerald and Kathleen had both closed their eyes, but somehow Jimmy hadn't. He didn't mean to cheat, he just forgot. And as Gerald's count reached 20, he saw a panel under the window open slowly. "Her," he said to himself. "I knew it was a trick," and at once shut his eyes like an honorable little boy. On the word 50, 6 eyes opened, and the panel was closed, and there was no princess. "She hasn't pulled it off this time," said Gerald. "Perhaps you'd better count again," said Kathleen. "I believe there's a cupboard under the window," said Jimmy, "and she's hidden in it. Secret panel, you know." You looked. That's cheating, said the voice of the princess so close to his ear that he quite jumped. I didn't cheat. Where on earth, whatever, said all three together, for still there was no princess to be seen. Come back visible, princess dear, said Kathleen. Shall we shut our eyes and count again? Don't be silly, said the voice of the princess, and it sounded very cross. We're not silly, said Jimmy, and his voice was cross too. Why can't you come back and have done with it? You know you're only hiding. Don't, said Kathleen gently. She is invisible, you know. So should I be if I got into the cupboard, said Jimmy. Oh, yes, said the sneering tone of the princess. You think yourselves very clever, I dare say, but I don't mind. We'll play that you can't see me if you like. Well, but we can't, said Gerald. It's no use getting in a wax. If you're hiding, as Jimmy said, you'd better come out. If you've really turned invisible, you'd better make yourself visible again. Do you really mean, asked a voice quite changed, but still in the princess's, that you can't see me? Can't you see that we can't? Asked Jimmy rather unreasonably. The sun was blazing in at the window. The 8-sided room was very hot, and everyone was getting cross. You can't see me? There was a sound of a sob in the voice of the invisible princess. No, I tell you, said Jimmy, and I want my tea. And what he was saying was broken off, so short as one might break a stick of sealing wax. And then in the golden afternoon a really quite horrid thing happened. Jimmy suddenly leaned backwards, then forwards, his eyes open wide and his mouth too. Backward and forward he went very quickly and abruptly, then stood still. Oh, Jimmy, dear Jimmy, cried Kathleen, hurrying to him. What is it, dear? What is it? Gasped Jimmy angrily. She shook me. Yes, said the voice of the princess, and I'll shake him again if he keeps on saying he can't see me. You'd better shake me then, said Gerald angrily. I'm nearer your own size. And instantly she did, but not for long. The moment Gerald felt hands on his shoulders, he put up his own and caught those other hands by the wrists. And there he was, holding wrists that he couldn't see. It was a dreadful sensation. An invisible kick made him wince, but he held tight to the wrists. Kathy, he cried, come and hold her legs, she's kicking me. Where? Cried Kathleen, anxious to help. I don't see any legs. This is her hands I've got, cried Gerald. She is invisible right enough. Get hold of this hand and then you can feel your way down to her legs. Kathleen did so. I wish I could make you understand how very, very uncomfortable and frightening it is to feel in broad daylight hands and arms that you cannot see. I won't have you hold my legs, said the invisible princess, struggling violently. What are you so cross about? Gerald was quite calm. You said you'd be invisible, and you are. I'm not. You are really. Look in the glass. I'm not. I can't be. Look in the glass, Gerald repeated, quite unmoved. Let's go then, she said. Gerald did, and the moment he had done so, he found it impossible to believe that he had really been holding invisible hands. You're just pretending not to see me, said the princess anxiously. Aren't you? Do say you are. You've had your joke with me. Don't keep it up. I don't like it. On our sacred word of honor, said Gerald, you're still invisible. There was a silence. Then, come, said the princess. I'll let you out and you can go. I'm tired of playing with you. They followed her voice to the door and through it and along the little passage into the hall. No one said anything. Everyone felt very uncomfortable. Let's get out of this, whispered Jimmy as they got to the end of the hall. But the voice of the princess said, come out this way. It's quicker. I think you're perfectly hateful. I'm sorry I ever played with you. Mother always told me not to play with strange children. A door abruptly opened, though no hand was seen to touch it. Come through, can't you? Said the voice of the princess. It was a little anteroom with long, narrow mirrors between its long, narrow windows. Goodbye, said Gerald. Thanks for giving us such a jolly time. Let's part as friends, he added, holding out his hand. An unseen hand was slowly put in his, which closed on it vice-like. Now, he said, you've jolly well got to look in the glass and own that we are not liars. He led the invisible princess to one of the mirrors and held her in front of it by the shoulders. Now, he said, you just look for yourself. There was a silence, and then a cry of despair rang through the room. I'm invisible. Whatever shall I do? Take the ring off, said Kathleen, suddenly practical. Another silence. I can't, cried the princess. It won't come off. But it can't be the ring. Rings don't make you invisible. You said this one did, said Kathleen, and it has. But it can't, said the princess. I was only playing at magic. I just hid in the secret cupboard. It was only a game. Oh, whatever shall I do? A game, said Gerald slowly. But you can do magic, the invisible jewels, and you made them come visible. It's only a secret spring and the paneling slides up. What am I going to do? Kathleen moved towards the voice and gropingly got her arms around a pink silk waist that she couldn't see. Invisible arms clasped her. A hot, invisible cheek was laid against hers, and warm, invisible tears lay wet between the two faces. Don't cry, dear. Let me go and tell the king and queen. Your royal mother and father. Oh, don't mock me, said the poor princess. You know that was only a game, too. Like the bread and cheese, said Jimmy triumphantly. I knew that was. But your dress and being asleep in the maze and, I dressed up for fun because everyone's away at the fair, and I put the clue just to make it all more real. I was playing at Fair Rosamond first, and then I heard you talking in the maze, and I thought, what fun. And now I'm invisible, and I shall never come right again. Never, I know I shan't. It serves me right for lying, but I didn't really think you'd believe it. Not more than half, that is, she added hastily, trying to be truthful. But if you're not the princess, who are you? Asked Kathleen, still embracing the unseen. My aunt lives here, said the invisible princess. She may be home any time. What shall I do? Perhaps she knows some charm. Oh, nonsense, said the voice sharply. She doesn't believe in charms. She would be so vexed. Oh, I daren't let her see me like this, she added wildly. And all of you here, too, she'd be so dreadfully cross. The beautiful magic castle that the children had believed in now felt as though it was tumbling about their ears. All that was left was the invisibleness of the princess. But that, you will own, was a good deal. I just said it, moaned the voice, and it came true. I wish I'd never played at magic. I wish I'd never played at anything at all. Oh, don't say that, Gerald said kindly. Let's go out into the garden, near the lake, where it's cool. And we'll hold a solemn council. You'll like that, won't you? Oh, cried Kathleen suddenly, the buckle that makes magic come undone. It doesn't really, murmured the voice that seemed to speak without lips. I only just said that. You only just said that about the ring, said Gerald. Anyhow, let's try. Not you, me, said the voice. You go down to the Temple of Flora by the lake. I'll go back to the jewel room by myself. Aunt might see you. She won't see you, said Jimmy. Don't rub it in, said Gerald. Where is the Temple of Flora? That's the way, the voice said. Down those steps and along the winding path through the shrubbery. You can't miss it. It's white marble with a statue goddess inside. The three children went down to the white marble Temple of Flora that stood close against the side of a little hill and sat down in its shadowy inside. It had arches all round, except against the hill behind the statue, and it was cool and restful. They had not been there 5 minutes before the feet of a runner sounded loud on the gravel. A shadow very black and distinct fell on the white marble floor. Well, your shadow's not invisible anyhow, said Jimmy. Oh, bother my shadow, said the voice of the princess replied. We left the key inside the door, and it's shut itself with the wind, and it's a spring lock. There was a heartfelt pause. Then Gerald said in his most businesslike manner, Sit down, princess, and we'll have a thorough, good conversation about it. I shouldn't wonder, said Jimmy, if we were to wake up and find it was dreams. No such luck, said the voice. Well, said Gerald, first of all, what's your name? And if you're not a princess, who are you? I'm, said a voice broken with sobs. I'm the housekeeper's niece at the castle, and my name's Mabel Prowse. That's exactly what I thought, said Jimmy without a shadow of truth, because how could he? The others were silent. It was a moment full of agitation and confused ideas. Well, anyhow, said Gerald, you belong here. Yes, said the voice, and it came from the floor as though its owner had flung herself down in the madness of despair. Oh, yes, I belong here right enough, but what's the use of belonging anywhere if you're invisible? Those of my readers who have gone about much with an invisible companion will not need to be told how awkward the whole business is. For one thing, however, much you may have been convinced that your companion is invisible, You will, I feel sure, have found yourself every now and then saying, "This must be a dream," or "I know I shall wake up in half a second." And this was the case with Gerald, Kathleen, and Jimmy as they sat in the white marble temple of Flora, looking out through its arches at the sunshiny park and listening to the voice of the enchanted princess, who really was not a princess at all, but just the housekeeper's niece, Mabel Prowse, though, as Jimmy said, she was enchanted right enough. "It's no use talking," she said again and again, and the voice came from an empty-looking space between two pillars. "I never believed anything would happen, and now it has." "Well," said Gerald kindly, "can we do anything for you? Because if not, I think we ought to be going." "Yes," said Jimmy, "I do want my tea." "Tea," said the unseen Mabel scornfully. "Do you mean to tell me that you'd all go off to your teas and leave me after getting me into this mess?" "Well, of all the unfair princesses I have ever met," Gerald began, but Kathleen interrupted. "Oh, don't rag her," she said. "Think of how horrid it must be to be invisible." "I don't think," said the hidden Mabel, "that my aunt likes me very much as it is. She wouldn't let me go to the fair because I'd forgotten to put back some old trumpery shoe that Queen Elizabeth wore. I got it out from the glass case to try it on." "Did it fit?" asked Kathleen with interest. "No, it was much too small," said Mabel. "I don't believe it ever fitted anyone." "I do want my tea," said Jimmy. "I do really think perhaps we ought to go," said Gerald. "You see, it isn't as if we could do anything for you." "You'll have to tell your aunt," said Kathleen kindly. "No, no, no," moaned Mabel invisibly. "Take me with you. I'll leave her a note to say that I've run away to sea." "Girls don't run away to sea." "They might," said the stone floor between the pillars, "as stowaways, if nobody wanted a cabin boy, a cabin girl, I mean." "I'm sure you oughtn't," said Kathleen firmly. "Well, what am I to do?" "Really," said Gerald, "I don't know what the girl can do. Let her come home with us and have tea." "Oh, yes," said Jimmy, jumping up. "And have a good counsel after tea," said Jimmy. "But her aunt'll find she's gone." "So she would if I stayed." "Oh, come on," said Jimmy. "But the aunt'll think something's happened to her." "So it has. And she'll tell the police and they'll look everywhere for me." "They'll never find you," said Gerald. "Talk of disguises." "I'm sure," said Mabel. "Aunt would much rather never see me again than see me like this. She'd never get over it. It might kill her. She has spasms as it is. I'll write to her, and we'll put it in the big letter box at the gate as we go out. Has anyone got a bit of pencil and a scrap of paper?" Gerald had a notebook with leaves of the shiny kind which you have to write on, not with the black lead pencil, but with an ivory thing with a point of real lead, and it won't write on any other paper except the kind that is in the book, and this is often very annoying when you are in a hurry. Then was seen the strange spectacle of a little ivory stick with a leaden point, standing up at odd impossible-looking slant, and moving along all by itself as ordinary pencils do when you are writing with them. "May we look over?" asked Kathleen. There was no answer. The pencil went on writing. "Mayn't we look over?" Kathleen said again. "Oh, of course you may," said the voice near the paper. I nodded, didn't I? Oh, I forgot. My nodding's invisible too. The pencil was forming round, clear letters on the page torn out of the notebook. This is what it wrote. Dear Aunt, I'm afraid you will not see me again for some time. A lady in a motor car has adopted me, and we are going straight to the coast and then in a ship. It is useless to try to follow me. Farewell, and may you be happy. I hope you enjoyed the fair. Mabel. But that's all lies, said Jimmy bluntly. No, it isn't. It's fancy, said Mabel. If I said I'd become invisible, she'd think that was a lie anyhow. Oh, come along, said Jimmy. You can quarrel just as well walking. Gerald folded up the note as a lady in India had told him to do years before, and Mabel led them by another and very nearer way out of the park, and the walk home was a great deal shorter, too, than the walk out had been. The sky had clouded over while they were in the temple of Flora, and the first spots of rain fell as they got back to the house, very late indeed for tea. Mademoiselle was looking out of the window and came herself to open the door. But it is that you are in lateness, she cried. You have had a misfortune, no? All goes well? We are very sorry indeed, said Gerald. It took us longer to get home than we expected. I do hope you haven't been anxious. I have been thinking about you most of the way home. Go then, said the French lady, smiling. You shall have them in the same time, the tea and the supper, which they did. How could you say you were thinking about her all the time, said a voice just by Gerald's ear when Mademoiselle had left them alone with the bread and the butter and the milk and the baked apples. It was just as much a lie as me being adopted by a motor lady. No, it wasn't, said Gerald, through bread and butter. I was thinking about whether she'd be in a wax or not, so there. And with that, my beautiful, beloved friends, the angels and I wish you a blessed sleep. Be well, and know that you are loved.